This week on the Stepback, I talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves and other struggling teams. Talk about some of the playoff teams right now that look like they're struggling. And, as always, go into my weekly power rankings. This is the Stepback. Welcome to the Step Back. I'm Andrew Martini. Let's get right into things. The first, group of things I want to talk about are kind of the all the bottom seeded teams, I would say. And I want to start with Minnesota first because they're probably the most recent kind of big story out of all these bottom teams. So just last night on Sunday, they played a game against the New York Knicks. They lost it by like 4 points or something. And immediately following the game, there are reports that come out that the Timberwolves have parted ways with Ryan Saunders. And then just 5 minutes later, reports come out that they've hired former Raptors assistant, but the Raptors assistant for this season, Chris Finch. So that's pretty interesting. And they have Finch on a multi-year deal right now, or at least that is what is reported. But I don't really know what Minnesota is doing right now, because when I look at this roster, I don't think it's very good. And for me, it was hard to evaluate Ryan Saunders. Granted, I don't think he was that good of a coach to begin with. He's really young, and I just don't know if he was ready for it yet. He probably just needs to spend more time in the league. Maybe he's not head coach material. Who knows? But he definitely got a shot at it. And Chris Finch, he's paid his dues for a while, so good on him for finally becoming a head coach. And good on the Raptors for letting the Timberwolves take their assistant coach. But I'm not sure how to evaluate the Timberwolves, because their GM Gerson Rosas, I hope I'm saying that correctly, I'll just refer to him as Rosas, has made quite a bit of moves since he's taken over the job. Like, this roster, I'm pretty sure since he's taken over, the only players that have been there since he got the job, I think, are Okogie and Towns. I think it's only Okogie and Towns since he's gotten there. And then he did, I think, draft Jarrett Culver not soon after he got the job. So I guess there's really only 3 players that have been there since he got the job. Everyone else on this roster is completely different. And they made that trade for D'Angelo Russell last season. They gave up a pretty lightly protected pick. And then they didn't put a roster together that really could do much. Like, they have a lot of nice pieces, but I don't know if these pieces necessarily fit together. And I don't know how to evaluate the D'Angelo Russell for Andrew Wiggins swap, because D'Angelo Russell and Towns have played 5 games together. Last year, Towns was injured. D'Angelo Russell, played his games. I think they might have played a few games last year together. And then the whole pandemic happened. They didn't make the bubble, and so they're coming back into this season. They play a few games together. Towns gets injured. Towns is all set to come back. I think he comes back for maybe a couple of games. He gets COVID. Now he's out for 3 weeks. And then Towns is all ready to come back. He's recovered. He's good now. And now D'Angelo Russell's injured. And I don't know how long he's going to be injured for. So the whole reason they traded for D'Angelo Russell was to make Towns happy, and these guys have just never played together. And so it's hard to evaluate that move. And I guess you could evaluate it. Well, if they're not going to be healthy, then it just wasn't a good move, you know? And granted, they are the worst record in the league right now, and they would have the best odds of getting the number one pick or at least keeping their pick. But there's still a pretty good chance that they lose this pick. And I'm not quite sure where the Timberwolves go from here, because they have Towns, who offensively is one of the best centers in the league. Defensively, he needs to get a little bit better, but maybe that's just not. Maybe he can play defense and he's just not engaged right now. Maybe he just needs to be on a better team. They have Anthony Edwards, who I think is definitely something. Like, athletically, he is a specimen. I don't know how else to describe him. He is extremely athletic. I like his handle. I think his shot selection needs to get a little bit better. And definitely as the season has gone on, you've seen his percentages go up. I think his shot selection has gotten a little bit better. And he honestly just seems like a fun guy to play with, just because he's got just like a good vibe energy. And so I like Edwards. Malik Beasley has been really nice this season. I think he's averaging nearly 20 points a game, if not more than that. And so he's on a good contract. Like, if that's what he's going to be averaging, they've got him locked up for a good while. And then they have D'Angelo Russell, who he hasn't really played that well this season, honestly. And if you look at the numbers, when D'Angelo Russell's on the floor, they're actually a worse team. Granted, a lot of that is still without Towns. But, again, that's what the numbers say. And I don't think D'Angelo Russell has necessarily been good this season either. Like, I think this is kind of a down year for him. I think he should be averaging 22 to 25 points a game. Maybe the opportunity's not there for him anymore just because Towns is back. Beasley's kind of emerged, and then Edwards has gotten involved a little bit more. So maybe even when/if D'Angelo does come back, maybe he doesn't have the opportunity to be a 20-point scorer anymore. So we'll see about that. But outside of those four guys, like, I'm not really attached to anyone on this roster. I think Naz Reid, in Towns' absence, has been solid, and he's definitely an NBA player. And it would be nice for them to keep him as a bench piece, a good backup for Towns. I'm not quite sure how he is defensively, but again, this is only his second year. He's still really young. So, that's something he could definitely improve on if he's not too good at that right now. They have Culver, who I don't know what they're doing with Culver, honestly. It just seems like they drafted him number 6. He struggled in his first year. And then they go out and they draft Edwards this year. Now they've got like a million shooting guards on this team. If you're not going to play Culver, wouldn't it be smarter to maybe trade him for, a defensive power forward? If you could find one, or just any power forward, because they don't have any on this team. And then there's Okogie, who's defensively is really, really, really good. Offensively, needs some work. Again, he's still young, so maybe he can improve on that. But outside of those guys, there's really no one on this team that's really like, oh, I want to keep that guy. And like all around, there's just a poorly constructed roster. They came into the season with no power forward. They still have no power forward. They have, like 70% of this roster is all guards, or all guards and wings. Like like it's hard for me to evaluate the coach when they just doesn't have a good roster. His best player isn't healthy. And maybe Chris Finch, who's supposed to be an offensive wizard, will, help this team kind of find the offensive potential that we thought they could have in the offseason. Maybe not. Maybe they're just gonna suck for the rest of the season. But to me, I kind of think about, where does Minnesota go in the offseason? If they keep their top 3 pick, well, what do they do with it? Like, do you go and get Cade Cut? Like, if you get the number 1 pick, like, you got a few guys who are going to be, top pick like contenders. So there's Cade Cunningham, there's Evan Mobley. What do you do? Do you like I guess if there is that special guy, like I guess Cade Cunningham, like he would fit in with these guys. It's just like maybe you then want to move D'Angelo for someone that better fits your roster. But then you kind of risk angering Towns. Within that begs the question to me, like, do you trade Towns? Right? Like, let's say all these picks are good players, but do you think they'll pan out by the time Towns' contract is up? Like with all these guys, if you hypothetically got them, would they be enough for Towns to want to stay on the Timberwolves? I don't know. Right? So now, if I'm the Timberwolves, now I got to think about moving Towns and just kind of starting over with Edwards, and hopefully, hypothetically, they keep their pick this year, and so you start over with Edwards, Beasley, or maybe you trade Beasley, but you start with Edwards and whoever you pick this year. Maybe that's a better road for Minnesota. And through all this, I just kind of feel bad for Timberwolves fans, because it seems like every 5 years this team is just rebuilding again. Like, they had KG, then they trade him. Then they get Kevin Love and Ricky Rubio. They missed on Steph Curry, but, like, they almost made the playoffs one year. And then they trade Kevin Love, and they start over again. So now they got Wiggins. They get the number 1 pick again. They get Towns. You're like, okay, Minnesota's on the rise. They trade for Jimmy Butler. They make the playoffs. And then it just all goes to hell. All right, they have some bad seasons, and they get the number 1 pick again. And so now you've kind of started over. Wiggins is gone, Jimmy's gone. Now you've got D'Angelo Russell, you've got Anthony Edwards, and you got Towns. And it just feels like they're just going to start over again. And it's got to suck to be a Timberwolves fan, because it seems that this franchise is just incapable of making good decisions. So we'll see where they go. The other team towards the bottom of the standings that is interesting to me is the Wizards. And the Wizards aren't necessarily out of the playoff race yet. They've won their last 4 games, and they're only, a few games behind the 10 seed. And that's the Miami Heat right now. And I'll get into the Miami Heat later. And it's entirely possible that, even with the Wizards struggling, that they have a good shot at making the playoffs. The 7 through 10 seeds aren't exactly strong teams, except maybe the Miami Heat, who struggled early on with injuries and COVID. Because right now it's the New York Knicks, the Charlotte Hornets, the Chicago Bulls, I believe, and then Miami Heat. Honestly, like I could see the Wizards by the end of the season, with Beal, maybe hopefully Westbrook has finally, settled into his new team, and maybe Bertans finds a shot again. Uh, and I could see them being in the play-in spot and then getting in. I don't know how realistic it is for them to be in the 7-8 seeds or even higher. But again, this Eastern Conference is just, I don't want to say it's bad, but a lot of teams are close, which makes it competitive. But they also only have I think 3 or 4 teams above 500 right now. So it's entirely possible for a team like the Celtics to lose a few games in a row, and now they're suddenly, the 9 seed. And then you have like the Knicks and the Hornets and like the 5-6 seed. Like, it's entirely possible for that to happen. I don't think that's going to happen, but it is possible. And so that's what makes me think the Wizards definitely have a shot still. If they were thinking about trading Bradley Beal, which I don't think they are, and I don't think that's what Beal wants, I would at least ride out this season with him because they're not out of the race yet. And even next season, like going forward, just like get a new coach. Even if you do make the playoffs this year, just get a new coach. So, that's my thoughts on the Wizards right now. But let's get into the Miami Heat because, again, the Heat are still struggling. They had a really nice win over the Lakers not too long ago. 96-94 win. And since Jimmy Butler has come back, they've gone 10-8, so they're above 500. And without him, they struggled a lot. And so, the people are starting on NBA Twitter, you're starting to clown the Heat for, not wanting to give up Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson for James Harden. Realistically, the Heat stood no chance in even acquiring James Harden. They didn't have the picks that Brooklyn could offer. They didn't have the picks or the player that Philadelphia could offer. Denver, if they wanted Harden, had a better offer. So, realistically, I don't know what moves the Heat can make. I really wouldn't trade Hero. It's his second season right now, and he's averaging 17 a game. So I'd want to hold on to him. I think Hero can be a good player. I don't know how good Hero can be, but I'd hold on to him right now. He wouldn't be untouchable to me. Like, if they did have the opportunity to actually trade for Harden, like if they had like the picks to do it, and it would cost you Tyler Hero and picks, I would have done that. I don't think Hero is untouchable. But, we'll see. But I don't know what moves the Heat can make because, the Rockets are sellers. And so, Victor Oladipo could be an option. There's been reports that DeMarcus Cousins is either going to get traded or cut by the Rockets. Maybe you could pick him up. He'd be cheap. Decent insurance. He's been okay this season. He hasn't been great. PJ Tucker could be an option. I don't know how realistic that one is. I mean, you could just trade their human trade exception and Myers Leonard. So, I mean, you could do that real quick, but then the Rockets would be like, well, give us another player because Myers Leonard isn't going to play for us. So I'm not sure what moves the Heat could do right now. But I do expect them to, by the end of the season, either be 500 or over 500. As long as Jimmy Butler's healthy, I think he's kind of the cog for that wheel. And we'll see how it goes for the Heat. But I am confident that they're going to be in the playoffs. I think they're too good. I think they're too, I don't want to say disciplined, but, I would be very surprised if they just weren't in the playoffs. So I did also want to talk about a couple of teams that aren't necessarily, bottom of their conferences or struggling. Well, they are, I would say, struggling a little bit. And the first team is the Grizzlies. And I really like what the Grizzlies have done. They've just drafted good, solid players that fit well together, that know how to play basketball. And that's what's keeping them afloat right now. But I'm a little bit disappointed with Ja Morant this season. I know he's still young. I know it's only his second season. But I thought he was brilliant last year. And I thought he was going to come into this season and make some kind of leap. And for the most part, he really hasn't from what I've seen. And I don't want to be too hard on Ja Morant because he's 21 years old. And he's averaging 18 and 7. Those are good numbers. But I was hoping, maybe he'd be, in the 20, 22 points per game range this season. And he hasn't. And I'm not quite sure, why. Maybe he's just not really making a leap. The other thing for the Grizzlies is that they're missing Jaren Jackson Jr. And that's somebody who I think is incredibly important to this team. I also think they're missing Jaren Jackson Jr., who's incredibly important to this team defensively. Offensively, he gives them another option. And it would be really awesome for them to get Justice Winslow back because it gives them another creator. It gives them a guy who's a decent shooter. And when he is healthy, a plus defender. It would be really, really awesome to see Winslow in the Grizzlies jersey finally. I just don't know if it's going to happen. Or I think it's supposed to happen soon. So hopefully that happens. Right now the Grizzlies are, I think, 13-13. They're definitely not out of the playoff picture. But there's just some steep competition in the West. Even the Pelicans and the Kings, who are under 500 right now, all they need to go, on a 4 or 5 game winning streak, and they're back right in the 7 through 10 seeds. The other team that has kind of struggled a little bit to me is the Boston Celtics. They're 15-15 right now, and they started the season pretty well, even though they were injured. Jaylen Brown improved immensely. Jason Tatum's been rock solid this season. He's been very, very good. Kemba Walker's been streaky since he's come back from injury. And their young guys have been okay. Robert Williams, I've liked this season. Grant Williams has been okay. Semi Ojeleye, he's getting minutes. They're starting to play their draft pick this year, Aaron Nesmith. Their other pick, Peyton Pritchard, has been solid for a rookie. And they have missed Marcus Smart. I will say, and I think that's probably why they're struggling. Because to me, Smart he's kind of the heart and soul of this team, I would say. And, maybe, I would say he's the leader of this team. And I think, I don't actually know who the leader of this team is. Is it Tatum? Because Tatum's the best player. or is it Marcus Smart, or is it Kemba Walker because he's the best veteran on that team. But yeah, I think I would say Marcus Smart is the leader. I think he's the most vocal guy on that team. He's the most tenured Celtic right now. But and I think their recent struggles have definitely been, or not have been, but are correlated to the absence of Smart. I think Smart gives them a presence, gives them a confidence to close out games and to not be blowing leads. Like last night to the Pelicans, they were up 24. And they blow a lead and they lose the game in overtime 120 to 115. When you're up 24, like you need to be able to close out games. And this hasn't been necessarily, like a one-time thing. Like they've blown leads. They haven't lost other games, but they've had 20-point leads in a lot of games this season. And by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, that lead has disappeared. And it's like you're like 4 minutes left in the fourth, and you're like, why are the Hawks only down 5? They were down like 24, 10 minutes ago. Like I think that would be the biggest problem for the Celtics right now. Is just figuring out, how to keep your lead. And I think blowing that kind of lead to the Pelicans, I think is concerning. Because the Pelicans right now are just not a good defensive team at all. Steven Adams wasn't even playing that game. In the first half, I thought they did a good job of not really letting Zion be Zion. And then the second half, him and Ingram just kind of took over. Jason Tatum had a phenomenal game. Jaylen Brown was solid. And then Kemba Walker struggled. And I like Kemba, but he's just been very streaky this season. And I think some of that is due to the fact that he is the third option now. And Kemba's aware of it. He's a good guy. He does want to see Jason and Jaylen succeed, and he's fine with being the third option. I just don't know that this is how you're going to get the best Kemba necessarily. Because you'll have like a couple games in a row where he's like 24, 25 points. And then you'll have this game where, he's taking up like pull-up threes, with 2 minutes left in the fourth. And, he's just bricking them. And so I think they just need to figure out the dynamic between this team. Because once they figure out kind of, I think they just need to just like, it sounds simple, but just like don't blow leads. And I feel like in high school I played volleyball, and I feel like this is something that can be applied to all levels of sport. And a lot of times my team, we'd be up 2-0, and then we'd blow a couple sets. And all of a sudden, we're in a game. We're in a set 5 match against a team we're clearly better than. And one of our coaches would call this competitive laziness. And I think a lot of professional teams kind of struggle with this. Like, I think the Celtics are much better than the Pelicans right now. I think their record shows it. I think they had the two best players on the court. And they're in the driver's seat. And so I don't necessarily know what it is, but it seems like when they get a lead, they take their foot off the gas. Instead of gunning it, they're taking their foot off the gas. And I think when you're in that kind of position, you need to gun it. You need to go for it. Do not let the other team come back. And by the time they're ready to put their foot back on the gas, it's too late. The Pelicans are only down 2 points, and they have the momentum. They're taking over the driver's wheel. I think that can just I think competitive laziness can just kind of be applied to all levels of sport. Even my crappy high school volleyball team, to professional NBA players. Like there's just something in their mind like they're just not able to keep their foot on the gas, and I don't know what it is. But once they figure that out, like then they're not going to be blowing leads, and I think they'll look much better, honestly. And I don't know if it's because Marcus Smart isn't there. Because if I think Marcus Smart is there, I don't know. Like, I think he's vocal enough, and I think he's got enough respect in the locker room and amongst the players where he can kind of be like, hey, let's not blow this lead. And then they'll kind of like maybe not be as competitively lazy as they have been recently. So we'll see. All right, so I want to finish off this episode with power rankings again. So my previous power rankings from a couple weeks ago are number 1, Lakers, number 2, Sixers, 3, Jazz, 4, Clippers, 5, Bucks, 6, Nets, 7, Celtics, 8, Nuggets, 9, Blazers, 10, Pacers. So this week, my power rankings are quite different. Number 1, I have the Jazz. I think this team has been phenomenal this season. By far the best record in the league. I don't know by far, but best record in the league by, a few losses. And just have, in every aspect, just looked dominant. I expect the Jazz to make some sort of move to maybe improve this roster because I think they can really go for it this year. I don't know what move they could do to improve. Maybe it would be to bolster the bench a little bit. Maybe there's some good guys in the buyout market they can pick up. But I think the Jazz have just been a treat to watch this year, and I'm really happy for them. Number 2, I still have the Lakers. I know AD is out, but this team is still good. I think if they continue to drop games with AD out, I'll probably drop them down a bit. But, right now I just think, all around this roster, this is still the second best team in the league. Number 4, I have the Clippers. I have them over the Sixers. I think the Sixers have just, if they don't have Embiid, it's tough for them to win games to me. And even last night, they lost the game with Embiid. He did just have, 50-point, 17 rebound game. He does have like 27-12 or something, or 25-12 last night. But it was on like 6 of 20 shooting. And granted, if Embiid's not playing well, you're probably not going to win the game. I have been impressed with Ben Simmons. And I've liked Tobias Harris and I have liked Embiid, but I just can't put them over the Clippers this week. The Clippers without Kawhi and Paul George have managed to stay afloat and stay top 3 in their conference. So I think that's why, I'm going to have them at number 3. Whereas I think the Sixers, need to make another move. And just kind of improve upon what they already have. But, it's close to those two teams. You can honestly switch them. Number 5, I have the Nets, and I fully expect the Nets to rise my power rankings soon. They went on their Pacific Division road trip, and they swept it. And that's a lot of good teams. That's the Lakers, that's the Warriors, that's the Clippers, Suns, and Kings. And all those teams are good teams, except for maybe the Kings. But the Kings are no, slouch. Like they lose a lot of close games. Granted, their defense isn't good, but their offense is decent enough. So I think as the Nets guys get to play together longer, you'll see them improve. Number 6 is the Bucks. Oh, my bad. Number 6 is the Suns. The Suns started the season really well, dropped a bunch of games, and then since they dropped those games, they have turned it back on, and now they're the 4 seed in the West, and I think they have looked very solid. Number 7, I have the Bucks. The Bucks are one of the disappointing teams to me, and they have these games where like you think they should win, but they don't, and then the next game they go blow out like a team they should blow out. But the Bucks are really weird and inconsistent to me, and it's tough for me to put them higher than 7 this week just because of how inconsistent they are. Number 8, I have the Blazers. Even without C.J. McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic, this Blazers team has been very solid. Gary Trent Jr. has come into the starting lineup and has been phenomenal. Anthony Simons coming off the bench. He's improved this year. Damian Lillard, I would say, is an MVP candidate this year, especially if they keep winning games. And when CJ comes back, when Nurkic comes back, this team is going to be very, very good, hopefully. Number 9, I have the Raptors. The Raptors started 2-8, and they are now 16-15. So if you could do the math, since they've gone 2-8, the Raptors have gone 14-7. That's pretty good. And they didn't start well this season because I think Siakam was struggling, and it's not a winning streak, but they started winning more games as soon as Siakam kind of found his shot again and got more comfortable. So you can see where I'm going with that. I think this team is a little bit underrated still. I feel like we say this about the Raptors every single season. The Raptors are underrated. Number 10, this one's tough for me. I was thinking about Pacers here, but I think I'm going to have to go with the Nuggets. It's hard for me to leave the Nuggets off and, put a team like the Pacers in there when the Nuggets have Jokic, who has been one of the 5 best players in the league this season. I like the Pacers, but I just have more confidence that by the end of the season, the Nuggets are going to be a better team. With Jokic. Hopefully, Jamal Murray finally turns it on. I feel like I've been saying, Jamal Murray, turn it on for like 3 years now. Hopefully he does. Maybe Michael Porter Jr. pops finally. And, the Nuggets just find their stride. So, this has been the Step Back. I've been Andrew Martini. I'll see you guys in the next one.